One day I was at Salvation Army and I saw a record without the cover. It was just a naked record with a white label that said, "What is chiropractic?" by somebody called BJ Palmer. So those weren't made to last. You played those on the radio once and then you threw them out. So I could tell right away this was made for radio broadcast. So I knew this was something valuable, unusual, and very rare, you know. So I took it home and looked up who BJ Palmer was. And of course, he's the developer of chiropractic. So I knew I had something real special.
Welcome to the Vitalistic Voice. My name is Dr. Colin Elkin, and today I'm really excited about this show because this is a gentleman who I'm just meeting for the first time, but I've been following him for such a long time. You know, and as a chiropractor, I was just telling Todd Waters that I am a real history buff. I love the philosophy of chiropractic. I'm a real history buff, and I'm going to say I think I have found the greatest historian in the profession of chiropractic. He knows more and has facilitated more information as far as tying things together with the history than anybody else I know. So he runs a Facebook page on the internet that is the best source of chiropractic history. Today, my guest is Mr. Todd Waters. Todd, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. You caught me in a feisty mood. I usually don't do these kind of things, but I'm working on something really fun right now, and it kind of it's very exciting. And so you got me at the right moment. I feel
Well,
like
that's fantastic. I'd love to dive into it, you know, and so I would love to know because I was just we were talking before the podcast, and I was saying to Todd that I am like I'm a junkie when it comes to this Facebook page, and I'm on there very regularly. In fact, almost on a daily basis, because there's always something new. There's somebody on there that's sharing things, and there's some good commentary on things, tying things together. I'm a Canadian. I don't know if you knew that, Todd, but I'm a Canadian. I know you're in Michigan, but
I don't
so
hear I don't hear a Canadian accent.
yeah. So I'm a Canadian, eh? So anyway, yeah, but I grew up about 2 hours away from Port Perry. So I'm a big fan of obviously the history of D.D. Palmer and the whole transition and the beginning of the profession of chiropractic. But I would love to pick your brain today. So first of all, I'd love to ask you, how did you get into this and what got you the passion to start understanding and start following through the history of chiropractic?
Um, I've always liked old things, antiques. My grandparents were antique dealers, and my parents followed. So they were always dragging us to flea markets. And so I'd go around looking for things that I was interested in. And I've always liked presidents of the United States. And so this was one of the first treasures that I found. And to me, this was like my first real important possession, you know, because this was a part of history, you know, and it was made of bronze, you know, and it was super detailed. Here's Edison, here's Washington. And to me, these really meant something, you know, because it was a part of history and it was something I could be proud of. And so I've always collected little treasures like that. And I've always been interested in pirates or anything unusual. And presidents, of course, always been interested in America. And so when I'd find an interesting story, I'd transcribe it, I'd write it out and keep it for myself. And I had a little notebook of transcription. So I guess I've always done this. I've always just transcribed things that were really meaningful to me and history related or just unusual. So I've always collected stories.
So what transitioned that into the profession of chiropractic? How did you get interested in learning about the Palmers and how everything started to come together and unfold?
One of the things I collected was records, record LPs. A lot of people probably don't even know what those are anymore, you know. But anyway, it's a big round disc, you know, that you play on a big cumbersome turntable, you know, and then that became a dinosaur, and then we have CDs, and now we don't even have CDs anymore. Now we just have digital streaming, you know. So it's an old form of media, and I find the most unusual record I could get, and usually those were spoken word records, like authors reading their works. Those always fascinated me to hear an author read his own work in his own words and the way he heard it in his mind. So that was meaningful to me. So I'd look for those. And one day I was at Salvation Army and I saw a record without the cover. It was just a naked record with a white label that said, "What is chiropractic?" by somebody called BJ Palmer. You know, I didn't know who he was, you know, but this was old. I knew it was super rare, very fragile. It would break if I hit it against the table. It was made of acetate. So those weren't made to last. You played those on the radio once and then you threw them out. So I could tell right away this was made for radio broadcast. So I knew this was something uh, valuable, unusual, and very rare, you know. So I took it home and looked up who BJ Palmer was. And of course, he's the developer of chiropractic. So I knew I had something real special. And I guess that's how I got started. Of course, I wanted to find some more items in chiropractic and BJ Palmer. So I did what everybody else does, grab the bigness of the fellow within. It's a huge green book, you know, huge like this, you know, and it's just a crash course of BJ Palmer, just everything he was into. It's got his philosophy, it's got his hobbies, his interests, court cases, lectures, just everything. So I looked at that and I saw, okay, he's into the circus. I'll start looking for avenues of any mentions of him with circuses in newspapers, or I'll look for, he had this garden called Little Bit of Heaven. So I'll look for items relating to that and started finding some souvenirs from Little Bit of Heaven. Actually, a lot quite like this, you know, I might actually have one back there, but anyway, it'd be like a trinket. And then on the back, it would say souvenir of Little Bit of Heaven, you know, so there's traces of BJ everywhere, but they're just scattered and you really got to look for them. And it's not easy, but I'm kind of good at that. So that's my specialty.
That's absolutely fascinating. And I'm curious. So, and like I said, you have the biggest collection of chiropractic history trinkets and paraphernalia and documents that I've ever seen. And I love sifting through the Facebook page. But did you have any experience with chiropractic? Like, were you a chiropractic patient, or did you ever have the inkling to go away to chiropractic school? Is that how this triggered your interest?
Well, yeah, I was an expert chiropractor myself. I mean, I'd crack my neck all the time in my back, and uh, I used to do that a lot. I'd feel something out in my back, and so I'd do whatever I could to make the noise, you know, the popping and everything, and that just wasn't working for me. So I went to a chiropractor, and he said, rightfully so, don't do that. Stop doing that. That's not good. And I did have a little experience with getting adjusted. Um, but I didn't learn a lot from it. But until I did go to my local chiropractor, who happened to be a BJ Palmer fanatic. And in his office, it's a BJ Palmer museum. And that was fascinating because I love antiques. I love old things that have survived the test of time. And the first thing he showed me was a neurokilometer. And this wasn't the small round number two device. This was the original in a wood box, you know, and it opened up, and then you saw the device with the meter, and then it had the pickup, you know, with the two prongs, you know, that would go down the back and the neck, and that was fascinating. I After I saw that, I that's what really started me wanting to see what I could find, you know, because that was probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen was that original neurokilometer, and I think that's what really started my interest in collecting everything I could on BJ Palmer and early chiropractic. And that's why my house looks like Sanford and Son right now. It's just piles of books everywhere and trinkets, and you know, it's a mess.
That's absolutely incredible, though. And I know when we were talking and setting this time up for this podcast, you were saying that you really have a specialty and a real passion for learning about the Palmer family. And likewise, I do too. I remember going to making the trip. Obviously, as a Canadian, it's only a couple hours away from my house and my practice to Port Perry, Ontario, and on the shore of Lake Scugog, in a children's playground, there's the bust of D. D. Palmer. And I just thought, what an unusual place to put it, but obviously the founder's birthplace. But let's talk a little bit about your knowledge in the history of Dee Dee coming from Port Perry, Ontario, making the trip to Davenport, Iowa, obviously having his family, BJ included, and then the development of the profession from there. What interesting things can you talk about in that journey that you know?
Well, I started finding a lot of items on BJ Palmer um, that I could collect and learn from, and offer to other chiropractors, you know, that were looking for that specific pamphlet or that little trinket or just some kind of souvenir to hang in their office. And of course, I started reading the green books and the biographies, and the biographies are what really interested me. You know, I would read the philosophy. I liked it, but I couldn't understand a lot of it. And BJ has a very unique way of writing. It's not easy to read. It doesn't flow very good. And so it's difficult reading. To be honest, I've never read a Green Book all the way through. I'm embarrassed to say, but the stories um, on their biographies, I read those in detail because then it flows. It's meaningful. It says something to me, and I want to know more. And there's so much on BJ. He published so many green books. Forget the count of them, but uh, there's maybe 37 of them or so. There's so much to read on them, and not a lot on Didi though. And Didi has this book right here. This was his book from 1910. There's a little bit of biography in here and just a little bit of stories, but not a whole lot. A lot of it's philosophy and his science, and a lot of attacking BJ. There's a lot of attacks in here, and maybe that started interesting me on what why do these guys why are they attacking each other so much? What's going on? And so that led me probably to this book right here. This was the only biography on D.D. Palmer at the time, written in probably 1981 by Vern Gilo. And I still like this book a lot. It's very easy reading. You can get through it in a few days if you want, and it tells the story from Canada to the day he died. But it's so short. There's just this guy was incredible, and this is all you have. But at the time, we didn't have internet, and we didn't have access to all the things we do now, and so this was the best information that they could provide at the time. So this is a very good work. And there's still some surprises in here that I still find today. They still mention something, journals that he wrote that nobody can locate today, and I wonder what happened to that. Where'd it go? I want to see that. So there's a few mysteries in here that are still worth researching or following. But to me, this wasn't good enough. I knew there was more out there. There had to be more. This had to be. And so I don't know what started it, but I started looking. He was a bee farmer. A lot of us know that he started out as a bee farmer, and there was a few ads in newspapers to buy his honey from the Sweet Home Nursery. And I just happened to find some old bee journals, and this one is from 1873. And isn't that amazing that this thing still survived? I mean, the paper is just thin, 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 and pretty nice condition. But what bee farmers would do is they would write out their success stories and their failures to teach other bee farmers. This is what I do to raise bees and get a lot of honey. So take this advice if you want. And D.D. Palmer started doing that. He started writing articles in this, and there's a lot of articles in bees. And in fact, this one right here, you probably can't see it, but it says D.D. Palmer. This was one of his articles, and he called his articles "Chips from Sweet Home," and that was little tidbits from the Sweet Home Nursery. And so I started finding a lot of these articles, and these were things nobody else had. You couldn't get them anywhere else. So I thought if I compiled them all and put them in a book, you could learn the biography of D.D. Palmer through 1869 to 1882. That's how long he kept his farm. And so that's a whole biography of D.D. that we didn't have before. And in Vern Gilo's book, there's probably, I don't know, a chapter like this on his bee farming, which it just wasn't enough for me. So I compiled all his bee articles and got about that much content. And so if you want to know about D.D.'s bees, it's all right here. And I make my books for myself, really, because I use them a lot, and I want to be able to look up things quick, just like that. I want to be able to look up the year something happened and where D.D. was, and there it is right here, the year I'm looking for, and it's easy for me to reference that way. So that's how I write my books.
What an incredible amount of work and effort and time you put into that. And I'm curious now, so from the days of bee farming, and then Didi became a magnetic healer, which led him into the whole philosophy of the above down, inside out spiritual healing, which really led into chiropractic. Can you talk a little bit about that transition?
Um, Yeah, he left he left the farm because his bees were all dying, but that was common throughout the states because the winters were so cold, the bees just wouldn't survive during the winters, and so they'd be dead in the spring. So you can't make honey that way, and you can't make money. So he had to do something else. And this is fascinating to me right here. We didn't know when Didi exactly when he sold his farm, and but it's right here. There's an ad right here, farm for sale,
Wow.
and it's Didi Palmer. So there it is. We got the date and the ad and a little description of his two-story house and the address. And, you know, I love finding stuff like that because the answer is just right there that we didn't have before.
And
Um,
was that in Canada or was that actually already in Davenport,
no, that was New Boston, Illinois.
Illinois? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so he left Illinois to reconnect with his family. They were living in Whatcheer, Iowa. And there he opened up a grocery store. And his brother was the editor of the newspaper. And and so there was another breadcrumb for me to follow. His brother had this newspaper, and he's always publishing articles. And so I looked at those newspapers and compiled all those stories, anything I could find of Didi or anything that had information about the town of Whatcheer at that time, just to add more to the Didi story, and found this much content on Whatcheer. And and the cool thing about that was he opened a grocery store, and I started finding advertisements for his grocery store. Go to Palmer, and this is when he sold fish and he sold other items in his store. Um, so it's really cool to find these breadcrumbs, these paper trails of Didi Palmer, and that's what I really like to do.
That's amazing.
And things were really divided in that town at that time. The brother, he was a conservative, and then there was another newspaper that was the Democratic newspaper, and so these editors were always attacking each other back and forth through their newspapers. Started getting really ugly and personal, and they started bringing up family members, and he actually mentioned Didi, saying I could say something but I won't, and I'm like, what, say it, I want to know. And but through these papers, this is how we learned how BJ's mom died. We didn't have that before. um, and she knew she was dying. She left a notice of her final wishes in the newspaper, and she wanted her kids to live with Dee Dee's brother and his wife, and that was her final wishes. And I contacted a family member of Lavinia's mom, or Lavinia, and she had her actual funeral program or notice, or and this is the date she died and the funeral where it happened, and this was all stuff that we didn't have before. So um, a lot of this information is still in families' personal collections, photographs in boxes, in barns, in family records, in newspapers, in phone directories. You have to look at all these different sources and put them all together, and that's what I've been doing. And
Todd, this is amazing. I mean, you're tying things together that I've never known in the past, even to this day. So I'm really impressed with this. This is incredible. So clearly, like what you're saying, then clearly there was some family tension, even when BJ was a child, for mom in her dying wishes for the kids to go live with their uncle instead of their father.
that's a mystery because here's another thing. She didn't publish it in Dee Dee's brother's paper. His brother was TJ Palmer. She published she published it in the other newspaper, the Democratic newspaper, which was their enemy. And so why did she do that? That was weird. Um, so there's a mystery. But shortly after, Dee Dee left Whatcheer, and there's a really strange ad in the newspaper saying that he needs a home for some children, and he gives the age of the children, and he says inquire at Palmer's grocery store. So basically, he has to leave town and leave his kids because he's going to go off and pursue something new. Pursue a new career. Maybe he couldn't take the kids with him. Um, That was fascinating to me. And he ended up in uh, Iola, Kansas, and became a magnetic healer. We didn't know about Kansas before. There's not a whole lot of information there, except for a few ads of Dr. Palmer and vital magnetic healing. And it didn't last there long, maybe a month. And that was what, 1886. And then all of a sudden, he's in Burlington, Iowa, opening up an office and practicing magnetic healing. And we didn't know really why or how he became a magnetic healer, what made him decide to do that. Um, but we found out a little bit later in Burlington from an ad, he revealed how he became to become a magnetic healer. And I guess it was just a natural gift that he had. And his father took over his grocery store. And I guess his father had bad rheumatism. And Dee Dee healed him. And his father said, if I could do that, I would open up a business, you know? And that might be how he decided to do it, you know? He had this natural gift. He healed his father, he healed his brother. Why not do it for other people and share this gift, you know? So he opens up a magnetic healing office in Burlington. Not a whole lot of information in Burlington. I was looking through the papers, typing in keywords, D.D. Palmer, just nothing was coming up. And I said, that's impossible. This guy makes a scene everywhere he goes. You know, he leaves a paper trail. He's loud. He's obnoxious. You know, there's got to be some trace of him. You know, but what I found was keyword searches didn't work in this newspaper because the paper was so poorly scanned, it couldn't find your keywords. So what I had to do was go to each newspaper during the time he lived there and read every single page, every single column, every single ad. And there I found an incredible story of D.D. Palmer that some people said you shouldn't publish this. This is gonna look bad for D.D. and chiropractic. So I had to make a decision. Do I tell the story? Do I shelf it? But I told it.
Well,
So
let's hear it. Let's dive into this.
okay. So this is what I found in Burlington. Well, no, hold on. Maybe about this is what the physical proof I found of him in Burlington, and the rest of this book is to help explain what happened. I didn't want to just exploit this thing. I wanted people to really understand what was happening. Magnetic healing, we still don't know exactly what it is or how Didi did it and how other people practiced it. But there wasn't one standard of magnetic healing. It could be some magnetic healers, they didn't touch their patients at all. They just used their hands and they made passes. You hear that? Hand passes. You hear that once in a while with Didi's articles. Other people, they actually massaged and rubbed and slapped, and their magnetism would pass from their hands into the patient. And so Didi, about the last year that he lived in Burlington, 1887, he got called to a patient. The the husband said, "My wife is dying. She's a patient of yours. You've treated her before. We need your help right now. She's dying." And so Didi left his office and went down the street from his office and found this lady, his patient, looking like she was pretty much dead on a sofa or a bed or whatever. And he checked for life. She was still living, but couldn't get any response out of her. Um, so he knew she was in bad shape. She was dying. And but yet once in a while she would start talking, but it wouldn't be the personality that he was familiar with. It was a different personality. And he said Didi was a spiritualist, and they did believe that life existed beyond our life here. It kept advancing and progressing. In the meantime, this lady was already very weak, very frail, starving because she just refused to eat, on the edge of death. And the family were all spiritualists, so they um, wanted her to come back, and they would form a circle around her to kind of form this battery of energy. And so Dee Dee joined hands with them to increase the life force or whatever. This was all part of magnetic healing. And she would seem like she was dead, but then she would come back and start speaking again. So is she dead or alive? And as a doctor, you're in a weird position. Is this patient dead? What do I do here? I'm working on a dead patient, but yet she keeps talking. She's alive. There's still life in her. There's still hope. Well, that's what he kept doing until there was no more life or hope. And she was dead finally, and she just wouldn't respond anymore. So they finally had to, Dee Dee signed a death certificate, and he wasn't allowed to do that because he wasn't a medical doctor. And the news got a hold of this story, and it just exploded. And Dee Dee went to trial and had to tell his story. And the judge said, "Could you stop talking about this spirit stuff? Was she dead or alive?" And Dee Dee was in a hard place because as a spiritualist, this was real. This wasn't make believe. This wasn't fun and games. This was real. And he had to explain as a spiritualist what was happening. But yet, as a physician and doctor, he was in a bad spot because he was. What do you do with a patient that is dying, but there's just no more hope for her? So he got censured from the town of Burlington. Ultimately, that's how he ended up in Davenport. He got basically censured out of Burlington, and it was a big news story. It didn't look good for him, so he had to start over again. But Davenport, everything just kind of fell into place. He got a really good location, started treating patients, and he went from just, I think, treating in one room, and all of a sudden he was at the top of the floor, renting the whole floor of a 4-story building, and just had an incredible business. So what he was doing was working. He everything just kind of went into place in Davenport.
Well, that's just such an incredible story. And even for you to explain that, it gives a picture of the mindset of Dee Dee, which then I would love to open up the conversation now. How did that transition into chiropractic, the experience with Harvey Lillard, and then the birth of the profession?
Let me see. He was in Davenport. He started in Davenport in 1888 and was a magnetic healer, and started treating a lot of patients. He had a newspaper, a big broadside newspaper about this size, but of course it was called the Educator, and then it was called the Magnetic. And he would publish patient testimonials, and he would reveal a little bit on his magnetic treatment. He didn't tell us how he did it, or how he learned. So it's very vague, but you got the sense that some of his patients would say that his hands were very warm and that they could feel like a tingling. So the patients would give their experience, and you could kind of tell that something was happening. It wasn't just imagination. It wasn't just a placebo effect. They were getting results. And um, and then we have the Harvey Lillard testimonial. See, this is funny because Palmer College in their archives, they have some of Dee Dee's newsletters. Like these newsletters like this. They don't have 1895, which would be really great, because then if there was a little testimonial from Harvey Lillard, it would just it'd be physical proof that event really happened, and it happened just the way Dee Dee said it did, and the dates would line up. Well, they're missing that issue, so it's really frustrating. And I think his testimonial, it appears in the 1897 edition of his newsletter, and Harvey says something like I, he gives a timeline that doesn't quite line up with what we know to be September 18th, 1895. It's a little bit off, you know. But maybe if we had the earlier edition of the newsletter, maybe Dee reprinted Harvey's testimonial, and so that's why the dates just don't seem to add up or line up. Because he did reprint that testimonial a few times, and so the dates wouldn't line up if the further that he reprinted that little blurb. But not to say that the event didn't happen or it didn't happen on that date or happen exactly the way Dee said it was. But me, I want every single piece of evidence I can get, and I just want to see it in print. You know, it's just for my own. I just like to have the whole story. You know.
Yeah,
But
that's like, again just incredible. So I'm curious now. So after that event, after Harvey Lillard, and over the next few years, BJ becomes very actively involved in the development of the school. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is your knowledge there about how everything started and dates, and then the progression of Palmer College?
um, there's really a blank area when BJ really started working with his father or learning chiropractic. There's just not a whole lot of information on that. And let me see. I always thought it was weird that BJ, his first practice, solo practice, was in Manistee, Michigan, and I just thought of all the places, why start there? That was just odd to me. And I live in Michigan, and so we always do this in Michigan. Well, you're from Canada, so you've probably seen this before. Here's Michigan. It's shaped like a glove. I live right here. This is me. Manistee, you have to cross a bridge, and Manistee would be right about here. Um, I think. Yeah, probably right about here. Anyway, I didn't understand why he started out there. Let me see. So Manistee is here. Davenport would be further down here. You would have to cross a big lake, a Michigan lake. And but I found out that Dee liked to go on trips, and Manistee was a trip that he had taken earlier with his family, his one of his many wives, and BJ. And maybe he just liked the area quite a bit. You know, maybe he just wanted to return to that area and just take a little vacation. And but also, Dee collected big animal heads to display in his office, and that was a big draw to get people to come to his office. He had one of the biggest it was called a natural wildlife exhibit, you know, so it'd be stuffed, I don't want to say stuffed animals, but stuffed specimens, you know, heads and full body stuffed elk and deer and bears or whatever, you know, just anything he could collect to draw people into his office. And there was a taxidermist that lived in Manistee, and BJ ended up shipping a big mounted deer head or elk head back to Dee. So maybe he went on that trip to, maybe Dee sent a head over there and he was going to mount it and make it look all presentable, the taxidermist, and BJ would come back with it. You know, I think that was the plan. But BJ liked the area so much and started meeting people and just started adjusting people, and then saw that he could make some money there. So I think that's what happened. I think he just started um, practicing chiropractic on a lot of people there, and just ended up staying there for a while. And then I think he was there for 3 months, and then came back home. And that was a weird period for the Palmer School because he had just started teaching chiropractic, and his students didn't stay in Davenport. They would start going back to their home states, Minnesota and California, Davenport, Illinois. And Dee wanted to keep tabs on his students, you know, find out if they were still practicing the way he wanted them to practice, you know, not straying, you know, and also they would correspond with each other and send letters and send advertisements saying, hey, what do you think of this ad? You like it? And Dee Dee even said to BJ, damn it, why didn't we think of that? I think Langworthy had a spine, and I forgot what it was exactly. Maybe he was had his hands on it like it was a piano, and I think Dee Dee liked that idea, so he said to BJ, "Oh, that was good. We should have came up with that." Um, and or they would criticize each other like, "No, Langworthy's getting into all this other uh, therapies and hydrotherapies. That's not chiropractic. I don't like that. What is this nature cure stuff? That's not chiropractic. That's not good. We need to reel him back in and teach him real chiropractic. Um, so Langworthy was a student of Dee Dee's, and he was a real early student, and he started his own school. And the diploma of chiropractic, it enabled you to teach and start your own school and not just practice, but you could basically become a competitor of Dee Dee Palmer. And so the students took full advantage of that. And then I think after the cat was out of the bag, Dee Dee was like, oh, what did I do? I just created a bunch of competitors. They're starting their own schools. They're teaching things that I don't agree with. What do I do now? And they had that problem with Langworthy. Langworthy had his own ideas, and Langworthy wanted to get a lot of students and build a school and make this big institution. And then he had this idea he wanted to form a board of chiropractic examiners. Um, so if a chiropractor was arrested for practicing medicine without a license, Langworthy had to answer. He had a whole board of chiropractors that would examine somebody to see if they were worthy to practice or not. And so he could do it legally. But he wanted to include all these other things that weren't chiropractic, and he was going to be too big and too powerful. And Dee Dee didn't like that, and BJ didn't like that. So they were both like, we got to stop this guy. So this law of chiropractic examiners almost passed. I think it passed Congress, and it went to the governor of Minnesota. And Dee Dee sent a letter to the governor of Minnesota saying, this guy is not practicing chiropractic, and he's going to be too powerful. You're going to have a mess on your hands. Of course, he said it more eloquently than I'm saying it. It really, I think the governor really understood what Dee Dee was saying, and so he threw out the bill, and it didn't pass. So that Dee Dee had a history of doing that. When he saw a chiropractor getting too big, too powerful, and trying to form a board of chiropractic examiners, he would stop it. He did that in Oklahoma, I believe, and Oregon. And part of the reason for that was because they were competitors. And if they didn't like each other, they could say, oh, you graduated at the Palmer School. That's you're no good. You don't pass. You have to go to my school, then you'll pass. They could set the rules, and so that wasn't ethical. And they
Wow.
wanted to, once you passed a chiropractic law, you weren't home free. The medical doctors could still, they would still have their hooks in you. They would say, okay, well, okay, you're legal now, but now we want you to add 10 more years of medical training, 10 more years of anatomy, this and this and this and this. So Dee Dee saw that this was not the way, because you would still be a puppet of the medical institution and lawyers and the government, and he's like, we have to fight this case by case. Well, that was more BJ. So there was always a constant struggle, every which way you went.
Well, it seems that the history of our profession really, so you're going way back to the beginning, and there was still this philosophical tension with different belief systems, which has gone through history and still remains today in certain circles. So I'm curious now, moving forward, and BJ kind of taking over the development of the profession, and you already alluded to it, that BJ really, from what I understand, was a very successful businessman, not just in chiropractic or the development of the school, but he had a number of different businesses and streams of income. And he was a very influential type of person. So, can we talk a little bit about BJ and his influence on the development of the profession and the philosophy as the profession grew?
Um, if you know BJ, you know he loves circuses. Um, but he loved showmanship. I think that's why he loved the circus. He loved the whole production, the excitement, and the presenters with top hats, and hypnotism. He loved all that. And There was a hypnotic act that would come to Davenport, and they were known throughout the states, and they were called the Flints, and they would hypnotize people in the audience and make them do things they wouldn't normally do. And the guy would Flint would hypnotize his daughter and have her lay on a table, and they'd put a big boulder on her. She was hypnotized, so she couldn't feel pain or whatever. And they would take a sledgehammer and they would smash the rock on her. Well, she got hurt during one of those performances, so she had to exit that act. And BJ says that he took her place, and so now BJ's traveling with Flint, and he's getting hypnotized and doing all sorts of fantastic things and getting rocks smashed on him. Um, I looked into that because I wanted to find any trace of that in a newspaper, because the newspapers covered Flint very well. They covered what town he was in. Um, he would um, he would hypnotize somebody on stage, and then they would carry a boy or girl, whoever it was, into a store window and set them up on display for days. And so you could see this hypnotized boy or girl in a store window, and then there'd be a sign saying, "This person is hypnotized. Come see me awaken her 10 o'clock on Friday night," or whatever. So it was always a big promotion. And BJ learned from this very much. He learned the store window trick, the signage, the promotions, the showmanship. And so BJ, when he would start traveling, he would use the store window trick and hang a bunch of human spines, and he had a skeleton that would light up to demonstrate the nervous system, and it was in a big box. And so if you saw that going down Main Street and you saw that in a Ace Hardware window, you would notice it, and you'd be like, "What's that? I want to see that. What's going on? 10 o'clock Friday, I'll be there." So he learned showmanship from Flint and any, circus people and anybody else that he saw value in. And here's a little, I don't know if you can see this, it's a little advertisement for the Flints. He would make hypnotize men and make them wear dresses and dance around on stage, just all sorts of weird antics. And it was funny, but yet BJ said he was one of the best hypnotists he had ever seen and ever experienced. And Flint would actually he would actually be able to hypnotize people so they could do operations on them. And doctors actually, there's a photograph of uh, a patient hypnotized, and the doctors are actually operating on a patient that Flint had hypnotized. So who knows? I mean, maybe that was real. But and BJ started messing around with hypnotism too. And I can't say he learned from Flint, but he ordered how to hypnotize people books from. There was another guy called Weltmer, I think, and he was one of the biggest hypnotists at the time, and he would offer all these self how to. And I think BJ learned a lot from him. And then BJ started lecturing on hypnotism. We have a poster from 1902, I think. And that's the only physical proof we have, BJ talking about hypnotism. But he does say something that's really odd. It's something like, "I will show proof that something like your intelligence will go, it can travel anywhere and come back with that information." I forgot the exact verbiage, but it was something fascinating like that. Um, anyway, showmanship. BJ was all about it, and he learned from it, and he learned how to make a buck from it. And it wasn't all about the buck, but of course, money's always nice, and it helps you further your vision. He had to.
Yes.
Uh, he wouldn't have been able to build his school from this little house to the block of property that Palmer College is now. It was incredible the amount of growth that school took over. That it's incredible the growth that school did with his leadership. Just immediately, it just boom.
So what were some of the other businesses that BJ, and I know the radio station, of course, but what were some of the other things that he did outside of chiropractic and outside of the school?
Oh, I just heard your Canadian accent out. Let me see. Anything he could do to make a buck. I remember him talking about emptying Coke bottles and filling them with fountain water from uh, the Palmer School, and he'd sell those. Uh, I don't know. They would sell goldfish. Didi would sell goldfish at their office too. That was another way they could make a little extra income. And Didi knew all about fishes and fish disease. BJ would advertise the fishes. He'd write on the sidewalks, fishes, 25 cents a piece or whatever, and come inside or whatever. And so Didi needed BJ as a kid to help him manage the office, help him sell the goldfish, advertise. BJ would actually fold his father's newspapers after they were printed. He would have to hand fold them and stamp a goldfish on the front of them to show, hey, we also sell goldfish. So some of these old newspapers that Didi have, you see a red stamp with the goldfish, and BJ by hand stamped those. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is very cool.
So he was always involved in his father's industries, and of course, BJ wouldn't just sit on his hands. He wanted to grow himself, and he wanted to do his own thing, and he really did. He really took off with it.
So let me ask you, Todd, if you don't mind, let's just talk about what your knowledge is as far as some of the research into the profession and to substantiate the practice of chiropractic. What things do you know of that BJ was doing to do studies and provide research for the profession?
Oh, he started his clinic. I'm going to get this wrong because my specialty is in the 1900s and the 20s, and then 30s. I'm not quite there yet. I'm just gradually building up to there. But he started the BJ Palmer Clinic, and I want to say 1933, 32, something like that. But they did a lot of research. But actually, BJ, he started a casebook as early as 1902 in Manistee. He would he had a he had a notebook, I don't know, like this, and he would write the patient's name, and he would write when he adjusted them and the date, and if they were improving or not, or if they were a big baby and not taking the adjustment very well and saying it was painful. He'd write a little note, big baby or whatever. And there was I remember a news story of a lady getting kicked by a horse in Manistee, and he adjusted her, and she got relieved very quickly. And so he was always writing down case studies, but of course, it became more scientific in the 30s, with their research, and they started buying lab equipment and actually doing blood and urine analysis of patients just to see where they were before the adjustments and where they were after. And they when you went into the clinic, they had a rule book. You couldn't just show up when you wanted to and smoke and drink and party. I mean, there was specific guidelines you had to follow, because if he was going to help you, you had to help yourself too, and you had to, if he was going to lead you, you had to listen and be obedient, because otherwise it'd be wasted. So you had to follow his instructions, and there's just now at Palmer, there's just boxes and boxes and boxes of patient research from the clinic. They were starting to scan them. I don't know if that project ever finished or not, but just a whole basement full of research and crazy, just crazy. You wouldn't be able to go through it all. It's just all this stuff. You can't go through it all. There's just so much out there. It's overwhelming.
How many green books do you own?
Oh, um, digitally you can own them all and fit in a flash drive this big. I think that's the way most people do it now. And Scott Jackson puts them all, he scans them all himself, finds the original green books, scans them and makes them available for free to people. You can do keyword searches and find exactly what you're looking for. And um, so you don't have to own the physical copy anymore. And of course, I like paper. I like owning the real book because for some reason, uh, um, I when I find a passage I like, for some reason, it's just easy for me to open a book and I can kind of visualize where it is in the book and I can find it right away. And that's just the way my mind works. When on digital, um, my memory doesn't work that way, and I have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll until I find the article or passage or content that I'm looking for. But as far as a physical green book, I I have Dee Dee's 1910 book, and I always seem to keep it close by. It just resonates with me. But the one that really, I'll never get rid of this book. This is my favorite chiropractic book. This is Dee Dee Palmer's very rare second book, and what makes it so rare is that um, he had these this set of lectures that it was his last writings, and he died before he could really complete all his lectures and his new ideas on chiropractic. And so his wife published what he had, and it became this book. And it was a set of 23 lectures, I think, 23, 24. Um, and they didn't they didn't print very many of these, so they're very rare to find an original. But somebody, a doctor called Bebot, probably didn't say that right, but he started reproducing these books, and this is what I'm holding right now. This is a reproduction from the 60s, and even these are very hard to get now. But basically, he sent an announcement to people saying, "Did you know Dee Dee had a second book?" Um, this is his little announcement. This is cool. He's announcing to the profession, yes, Dee Dee had a second book, and you can own it now. And a fellow owns it, and he says he wouldn't sell it for $1,000. So here it is. You can own it now. You, I think what he did is he said you can have this book for free, and if you don't like it, send it back. And if you like it, send me what, $5 or $16 or however much it was at the time. It was pennies. But this book is incredible. There's the very first lecture um, is mind blowing, and some people don't want to believe that Dee Dee wrote it because this was published after he died. And it's called The Moral Religious Duties of a Chiropractor. And if you read it, it's pretty striking what he says in this. But it had to be striking because at the time, especially in California and New York, chiropractors were just getting jailed left and right for practicing medicine without a license. And no matter what defense you came up with, however legally sound it was, no, you were going to pay a fine or you were going to jail. I mean, there's just nothing you could do. What Dee Dee, I think, was trying to do with this lecture is form a constitutional argument as chiropractors. This is our right to practice. And further, this is our religious right to practice. And chiropractic came from the other world, and I received it. So we have religious beliefs, we have moral beliefs, And even if you don't believe in God, it's still a moral duty to care for your patient. So you can't prosecute us because this is our moral and religious duty to care for our patients, and you're interfering with our ability to do that. So this was a doctrine to chiropractors, um, to use constitutionally to fight their case in a court of law. And some people actually use this lecture to defend themselves in court. We have evidence of a few people now that used it. And Didi gets kind of weird in the lecture, though, because he's talking about spiritual beings who can transfer knowledge to you, and some people don't want, especially chiropractors today, they don't want anything to do with spiritualism or religion in chiropractic, because chiropractic is a science, and this woo-woo talk would discredit the science, or make them look like kooks. So being that this lecture and book was published after Didi died, there's a fraction of people that want to say Didi didn't write this, his widow produced this, somebody else wrote this and put Didi's name on it. We don't want anything to do with this. This book's a fraud. The thing is, I know Didi Palmer's writing so well. His prose, the way he wrote, the way he talked in his writing, I read this and I hear and see Didi. His style is there, and he's there's even some attacks on BJ in these writings, and so this just drips with Didi Palmer. and he's also saying, for more on this information, see the adjuster page 533 or whatever. It's making constant references to his adjuster book. So and he said that this book is actually an appendix to this book. They're meant to go hand in hand, and they really do. But there's a lot of new ideas in this book, and there's it's just got a lot of really cool things in it. A lot of people don't know about this book. They should read it and check it out. It's just for me, there's a lot of striking things in it, and he even talks about nerve vibration, and goes further and further and further into it, and how your nervous system can pick up signals from other intelligences and perhaps other planets. It's just it's quite something.
Todd, this is absolutely fascinating. I'd love to just continue this conversation. I do want to respect your time. I mean, we could go all afternoon, I'm sure. I am absolutely amazed at, first of all, your collection of artifacts and what I like to call gold nuggets, as far as this historical data and papers and books and artifacts that you've collected, not to mention the time and effort you've dedicated into learning this. So I'd like to ask you just a couple of questions just to finalize. Based on your knowledge, and as a non-chiropractor, but you are so well studied in the history of chiropractic and the philosophy and the development of the profession, in your terms, in your words, how would you define what chiropractic is based on how it was developed?
Oh boy, you're gonna get me in trouble. um, that's I love the history, and I consider myself more of a biographer. I try to stay away from the philosophy, yet I read about it quite a bit, and I read Didi's words. I get myself into trouble when I try to talk about the philosophy, because I always get it wrong to somebody else, or maybe I do get it wrong. It's a separate thing. There's the history, there's a biography, there's the philosophy, and then there's opinions on um, and egos on that's not right, or you got this wrong, or don't say this, say this instead. Uh, be straight, be objective, straight, be a mixer, there's just, you can't be an expert on all of this stuff. And even history, you can't be an expert on every phase and every year of chiropractic, every decade, every invention, every patent, every, you know, you just can't read everything and be an expert in everything, and you just kind of have to focus and specialize on what you do best in your specialty, and that's what I try to do. And I do go outside of my lane sometimes, and I get scolded and slapped and banned, and but I try to just keep going. And I'm glad you like the page though, the group. And what I try to do there is I never meant to be uh the ringleader of the group, the what do you say, the administrator or whatever, but yet I have to be, because I can't just let every Tom, Dick, and Harry in there. I actually ask people before they even enter, are you a chiropractor? I don't want somebody that's not a chiropractor that just wants to start sending everybody ads, or I don't want somebody from the medical community spying on us to see what we're talking about. I just want to, and I don't want people in there that are just going to start swearing and just being childish. So let's have some rules. Let's be civil to each other. You guys discuss whatever you want to discuss. I'm going to discuss what I'm uh, studying and looking into and discovering. You do the same. You share what you're studying, what interests you. If you find a picture, share it. I don't want to be the leader. Uh, Everybody use the space to talk about what you want as far as history, and ask questions. Somebody here has the answer. We're connected to so many great chiropractors, and so many good historians. Somebody has the answer. So ask a question. Somebody has the answer, So I wanted people to be able to use this as a tool. And some people do, and some people just stay quiet, and they just kind of follow it every day without saying anything, which is okay too, But I just wanted it to be a sharing community and useful.
Well,
If it's
you
not
certainly,
useful,
yeah,
if it's not useful, well, what good is it?
for sure.
If you're just, I want people to be able to talk. I don't want to censor people, but yet if they're being rude and interruptive and telling everybody that they're wrong, somebody's got to step in once in a while and let the get rid of the subluxation, let it flow. That's kind of my job.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly done that. I give you tons of credit. And so the Facebook page is Chiropractic History. It is a private page. You have to ask for permission to become a member of it. And Todd, I give you tremendous credit because you've certainly created a community that truly promotes the history, and you've tied so many things together. And I got to tell you, I absolutely love going to the page. So I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
time and effort you've put into it. So
Thank you.
any final thoughts for today?
Oh, um,
Let me ask you, what is your big vision? What is your big vision for down the road for how you can facilitate, or what your contribution is to the profession moving forward?
well, I don't know. I've written my main goal was this is kind of what we started out with, was there's this much information on DD. That's not good enough. That's not working for me. So what I came up with in my own research with my own skills is I came up with this much information on DD, and still I'm finding more. Isn't that crazy? And that bothers the heck out of me when I find something new that really needs to be in one of these books. I have the ability to edit it and throw it in there so we can tell the whole story as much as we can, and go on. I don't think I can write another book on Didi because I've covered all his phases in life. And I started on BJ. I started from his childhood. There was just so many errors and wrong things that people were writing about BJ in his early history, and things that just didn't make sense. People were just making stuff up and filling in the gaps. And even BJ would jazz things up quite a bit. Say like having a boulder smashed on his chest. I found out that he probably didn't travel with Flint's at all, because the paper named who actually did. So I think BJ threw himself into that story because it was a great story. He was trying to teach a lesson, or he was trying to tell a story. And he would do that quite a bit. He would throw himself into the story to say, I was there. And so a lot of his stories, I'm not saying he made everything up, but he made them so they were entertaining, so they would stay in your mind. You would remember these great stories and you'd be able to recite them. Were they all true? I found out some of them weren't, but they were based on a true story or something that happened. And so in one of the books, I kind of showed what BJ said, and then I showed what really happened, and that might disappoint some people, but um, for me, I need to know what's real and what's not, and what really happened, so I can tell the whole story chronologically. And that's been my goal.
Well, you've certainly been very successful at that. So, Todd, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for your time today. This has been truly a pleasure and very enlightening for me. And I could listen to your stories and listen to your knowledge because in that brain of yours, you've got just a library of information just waiting to come out. So I appreciate all of your time.
Oh, thank you.